our new lecture series of the academic year. Many things. And one brother answered like this: what I like the most in Prabodhana is Father Henry's class. He also added one more thing: what I fear the most in Prabodhana is Father Henry's exam. not only in the classes, he continues to inspire us. He continues to motivate us. He really challenges us very moment of our life he is here with his way of life, looking at the life and his way of behavior here. And as we begin the new lecture series today and the first lecture on the promise of God that bracket and motivate Christian endurance, I would like to extend our sincere welcome to Father Henry on behalf of the entire community of Prabodhana. Welcome, dear Father. Community also. I'll welcome the community also.
Okay. Oh.
I wholeheartedly welcome all our beloved fathers, especially Father John Peter, our rector, Father Rajesh, our Dean of Studies, and our community fathers and all fathers who are joining us online. And I extend a warm welcome to all of you fathers. And along with our brothers, there are also many religious communities joining with us online right now today. And on behalf of the entire community of Prabodhana, I would like to welcome each and every one of you. A person becomes true Christian when he falls in love with Christ. I hope this journey, this series of lectures will help us to fall in love with Christ. And wishing you all a very fruitful time here. I remain. Thank you. Over to Father Henry.
So good morning, most reverend fathers and even most or more reverend brothers. Good evening, what did I say? Good evening, good morning to everybody. I'm supposed to talk to you about the promises of God that sustain or enable us to endure whatever that might be happening in our lives. I Googled to find out how many promises of God are there in the Bible. I came out with the answer. There are 3,000 to 30,000 promises of God. 30,000, of course, is a big number, which means including almost every word in the Bible as a promise of God, because Bible has about 31,700 and odd verses. So out of this you make 7,000 promises. Every word in the Bible might be a kind of promise. So I narrow down the promises of God to one promise, which underlines, which stands under every promise that Bible might hold. And that's what I wish to speak to you about this morning, and the implication of that in three settings of our life. See, when we say we make a promise, we actually send out our word or a gesture in advance. Promise, the word itself comes from pro-mittere, to send forth. Mittere is to send, pro is for, forth, etc. To send forth is the meaning of a promise. We send a word forth in advance and bind ourselves to being someone or doing something. We give or hand over the right to expect something from us to others or an organization. Many of you belong to the Palatine community. When you promise to the Society of the Catholic Apostolate, you are actually handing over a certain right to the society to expect a certain type of behavior from you, a certain type of development of character and personality from you. That's what we mean by a promise that we make. A promise enables us to travel towards a future to which we have bound ourselves. But the manner in which God makes promises to us is not that way. Actually, the God of the Bible is a God of promises. By his promises, God does not bind himself to become someone in the future or to do something in the future. Because God does not become, but he is. He is not the God of future times, but he is the future of time as well. Remember, God is, he does not become. And so when we speak of God making promises to us, we are speaking of God's revelation of himself to us, actually. Not that he is binding to do something in the future, because in God there is no future. As I said, he is time's future itself, not God of future times only. He does not become, he is. And what he is, towards this he beckons us, as it were, when he makes promises. He sets us free from whatever that might be binding us today, from reaching out to where he wants us to be. That's what we mean when we say God is making promises to us. He beckons us. He invites us. He sets us free from whatever that might be binding us today and beckons us towards where he wishes us to be. And today, as I said to you, I wish to discuss one promise that stands at the foundation of all promises of God. And St. Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 6 highlights this, beautifully summarizes this promise for us. I will live with them, and I will move among them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. I shall live with them, move among them, I shall be their God, and they shall be my people. Yeah. That's the promise that stands as a foundation for all other promises the Bible contains, promises of God. Yeah. Isaiah clarifies in chapter 7, 14, etc. All right. The manner in which God will dwell among us, move among us, and be our God. He foretells, prophesies that the virgin will conceive and shall bear a son and call him Emmanuel. And John tells us, finally, in his prologue, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we saw his glory, the glory of the only Son of God, full of grace and truth. So this is the manner in which God has chosen to be living among us, moving among us, and being our God and taking us to be his people. He has done this in his incarnate Son, who has become the presence of God among us. God is not now anymore in heaven, but he is among us. He is with us. In the incarnate Son, he is with us. He came to dwell among us, not to depart, not to go away from us, but to stay with us forever. And this is the promise of God. I will live among them, move among them. I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And in Jesus Christ, this has been realized. This promise has been fulfilled. God is with us now. I like to place this promise of God realized in Jesus Christ in 3 settings, because our theme is about endurance. What should this reality of the presence of God do to us on a daily basis in the things that happen to us? First of all, I like to place this in the context of tragedies or tragic events that occur in our lives. Yeah. We fall from a stairway, not all of us, of course, one or the other. I'm putting it in the plural because it could happen to any of us. And then we might be debilitated for the rest of our life. We break something irretrievably. We break or lose our health. Not long ago, we lost a young priest who was just ordained 1 or 2 years into his priesthood, and then, of course, he died. You know him. What shall we do about this? How shall we endure these things that happen to us? Is God with us? Many people ask this question. Nowadays, we are having this pandemic that is affecting the entire world, and there are people who are raising voices. No, God is coming to save you. It's the doctors and nurses who actually help you recover from health. God of Christianity or any other religion is not coming to save us. Where is God anyway? There are so many people praying, but nothing seems to be happening. Where is God? You can ask that type of question. But my dear friends, the implication of this promise of God to us should mean for us that the Father whom Jesus Christ spoke about, the Father, the good Father who makes the sun to rise upon both the good and the evil, the good Father who makes the rain to fall upon also the good and the evil, who feeds the birds of the air and the lilies of the field, who will not give us stones when we ask him for bread, who will not give us a scorpion or a snake when we ask him for a fish. This Father can never ever do harm to us. That's the significance of God making his home among us, walking with us, holding us in his arms. Can you accept this? Can you trust in this God who walks with you in the middle of a tragedy? That's the whole point of faith. It's not that we wait for a God who will take us out of this tragedy. He might. Sometimes he does. We pray to him. He hears our prayers. There are many of you who can testify to answered prayers, and there are many others who can testify to unanswered prayers. All right. Maybe equally. All right. Sometimes God seems to be so absent and silent. Other times, even without our knowledge, a deep in our hearts, a whisper, a desire, a movement of mind comes to be so real. And we stand back and wonder, did you hear my prayer, oh God? But the whole point of faith in the promise of the one who says, I am with you. I am holding you in this moment. I am taking you through this darkness, perhaps, which you are experiencing or walking through. Can you be assured in your life? That is the point of faith. Not waiting for a God who will come and deliver you, bring you good health. He might not. That's his choice. But while suffering ill health, can you accept that this is a loving gift from him in whose hand I rest, who is carrying me? That is the point of trust. If you read the book of Job, we meet the same kind of question and discussion. We are familiar with the story, and I don't have to narrate this. The beginning of the book, Job makes two fantastic statements which we learn by heart, and all of us know this. In 121, Job says, when everything is taken away from him, he says, naked I came from my mother's womb. Naked I shall return. The Lord has given, the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. A fantastic statement, apparently of a man who trusts in God. And secondly, in chapter 2:10, he comes out with another statement when his wife tells him, why don't you curse God and die? Job comes out with that pearl of a statement, do we not receive good gifts from God? And shall we also not receive evil from him? Remember, Job believes that it was God who gave him good gifts, and it was God who was now doing evil to him. The Lord has given, the Lord has taken away. This apparent trust of Yahweh is not trust yet, because Job is unable to accept at this point in his life that these tragedies that were occurring in his life were signs of loving gifts that God was giving him. He calls them evil because soon after making these two statements, if you turn to chapter 3, Job breaks down. He goes to pieces. He does not curse God, but he curses the day he was born. Yeah. But only towards the end of the book, Job learns what it means to trust in God. In the first part of the book, we have Job's resignation to something, those things that happened in his life. Resignation means acceptance of the unavoidable, simply enduring what cannot be removed from us. But trust means going one step further. It is being able to say, God, in this tragedy, in this darkness, in this pain, in this confusion, you are giving me a loving gift because you are walking with me. You are living with me. You are moving with me. I can't be separated from you. In 8:38 in Romans, Paul tells us about this. Who can separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus? Who can separate us? Can hunger, thirst, persecution, sword, or powers, present, future, principalities, dominions? None of these things can separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus. He tells us this. And in the middle of walking through a tragic situation, to be able to say, God, you love me. I am in your arms. I am held in your arms. And that is to trust in God. And that sustains you. That gives you the power of endurance. You are not a man who is resigned to living your life or accepting that you cannot, what you cannot avoid, but you are a man who is positively walking through darkness, knowing well that your next step is assured. Although you cannot see it, your next step is assured because it is taken with the assurance of God. Lewis Haskins, at the turn of the last century, 20th century, he wrote a few lines. I'll quote for you. It's a kind of New Year greeting that's often used. I said to the man who stood at the gate of the year, give me a light that I may step into the unknown. And he said to me, go out into the darkness. Put your hand into the hand of God, and it shall be to you better than light and safer than a known way. Go out into the darkness, put your hand into the hand of God, and it shall be to you better than light and safer than a known way. One who believes in the promises of God, one who has given his heart to be influenced, to be powered and fueled, energized by the power of God, is someone who can walk out there in the darkness and put his hand into the hand of God and feel loved when death is close by, perhaps. I'll say something about death. I must move on. Until when do I speak? 9:15 or? Oh, sorry, 10:15. Okay. Oh, I have only 15 minutes left. This is the problematics of old age. Yeah. When you grow old, you have too much to say about everything. This is the first setting I said, about some tragedies that occur. I want to place this assurance of God in the setting of some evil people do against us. It can happen. That people work against us. It's easier to accept a fall from the stairway or a tragedy or an illness or an accident as an act of God. But when your superior treats you unfairly, unjustly, when your companion works against you, he backbites, he betrays your trust, it's a little more difficult to accept that God could be involved in this process, in this evil that is being wreaked against your life. It might be a little more difficult. But my dear friends, I like to, recall to mind that text in Genesis, that narrative in Genesis about Joseph. Joseph had caused a lot of jealousy because he perhaps overwhelmingly, took more than his share of the affection of his father. So when his brothers found him by himself alone with them, they attacked him. They wanted to kill him, but the intervention of Reuben saved his life, and they lowered him in a dry well. And then subsequently, by the intervention of Judah, he was sold away to people, from a faraway land and who were going to a faraway land. When he was bound and gagged and lowered into a well or sold away to strangers, it may not have been a very pleasant experience for Joseph. But yet, in Genesis 45, 4-8, many years later, Joseph had become the second most powerful person in Egypt, next to Pharaoh. And he was receiving his brothers, and this is the text that where he is revealing his identity. We know that delightful story of Joseph and his brothers, etc. And this is what Joseph says to them: brothers, but do not be distressed and do not reproach yourselves for having sold me here. God therefore sent me on ahead of you to ensure for a remnant on earth to save your lives in an extraordinary deliverance. So it was not really you, but God who had me come here. This is in chapter 45, 4-8 of Genesis. There's another text, again in chapter 50, 19-20. Joseph says to his brothers, even though you meant harm to me, God meant it for good to achieve his present end, the survival of many people. Who could have seen so many years ahead that there would be a famine? But God saw. And he sent Joseph in advance. Joseph read that incident. So to believe in the promise of a God who says, I am your God, you are my son, the beloved, in whom I am well pleased, is perhaps, to believe in this God, to believe in his presence in my life is to encounter these type of experiences in our life as something he permits, so that he would bring something out of, this experience. It's a little difficult to accept, but all the same, when done, it has a kind of liberate you role in your personal life. When you come out on the other side of this, tragic experience of being ill-treated by, betrayed by, stabbed on the back by your fellow human beings, you are the stronger, you are the wiser, you are the more freer, etc. Thirdly, I want to place this promise in the setting of a conflict. Sometimes acute conflict situation, we may turn around and ask, God, are you here? I'd like to narrate to you a little story from a novel written by Shusaku Endo, a Japanese writer who published his novel way back in 1966. The novel was called Silence. He's referring to the silence of God. It's a story of a priest, a Catholic priest. His name in the novel is Sebastião Rodrigues. Sebastião Rodrigues. He goes to Japan. At this time in 17th century, there was tremendous persecution of Christians. Japanese authorities wanted to eliminate this seeds of Christianity from their land, as it were. So they devised a method of ferreting out, bringing out these hidden Christians. Christianity had gone underground because of persecution, and to bring the hidden Christians, they devised the method of arresting people who were suspected of being Christians and asking them to stamp upon an engraved image of Christ. They called that a fumie. So people had to step upon this fumie. Until this Rodriguez reached Japan, they used to torture priests, and many of them, of course, stood by their faith and died. But then they began to change their tactics. They used to torture Christians, being watched by priests. Priests were leaders. If priests renounced their faith, it's a defeat, of course, for entire Christian people. So they used to torture, weak Christian people, being witnessed by priests. So the same was done in the course of time. Of course, this Sebastião Rodrigues and his companion, they were arrested. Another priest, they were also arrested, tortured, etc. But they stood by. But then they used this tactic of torturing the Christian community, the flock of these priests. What should they do? Should they renounce faith and save these people? Or stand by their faith and let these people die? What should they do? A situation of acute conflict. You can face this also, whether it be an abortion situation or any other situation of choosing between good and evil. The novel discusses elaborately this torture that goes on in this good priest's mind. What should he do? Should he renounce faith and save these people, or stand by his faith and let these people suffer and die, etc.? And then, of course, as the novel ends, the figure of Christ in the fumie itself spoke to Sebastião Rodrigues. It said this, I quote from that book: "You may tremble, you may tremble. I more than anyone know of the pain in your foot." He was being hung upside down by one leg. "You may tremble. It was to be trembled on by men that I was born into this world. It was to share men's pain that I carried my cross." And so Rodriguez stamped on that figure of Christ and recanted from his faith. What do you think? Did he do right? Did he have his God beside him when he did this? Did he really hear Christ's voice saying, "Go ahead and trample me, trample me. I was born for this purpose of being trampled. I was crucified on the cross. I was defaced, I was broken. And for this purpose I was born." Was Christ truly saying to Rodriguez, "Please stamp on me"? Or was it the imagination of a novelist? We are left with this question. But I like to take this discussion one step further. Give me 5 more minutes. I'll take this step one, take this point one step further. Surely we would not consider Rodriguez a martyr for having saved the people by recanting on his faith. Is our integrity for sale for some price? Is the integrity of a human person for sale for some price? Some people sell their integrity for the promises of this world, for wealth and money and promises of a good life, etc. They sell their integrity. Others sell their integrity under torture, under pain. And Rodriguez sold his integrity for mercy and compassion for his flock. But can we sell our integrity for mercy and compassion? Can we do wrong, in other words, renouncing one's faith, selling one's integrity? Surely is wrong. Can we do wrong in order to help people? Out of mercy, compassion, can we do wrong? This is the question that we are left with. And I like to answer that question returning to this promise of God. If you really believe that God is here with me in such circumstances, He is accompanying me, He is accompanying those who are suffering, etc. Can we get beyond compassion itself and stand by this integrity to which we are called? Affirming by this integrity, no matter what, I will not sell my soul for any price, not even for compassion and mercy. You may ask, is it not human pride? I answer by saying it is an expression of reliance on the Lord of history, who is the Lord of my history and the history of those who suffer. I am a witness to their suffering. My heart is racked by pain when I see that my own stance is a cause for their pain and misery, even death sometimes. But then to stand at the line between right and wrong and say, God, I will never transgress this line to do wrong in order to bring about good, because I believe in you. You are the Lord of my history. You are a good God. Even out of this tragedy, you will bring that which is right and good. And to me, That is to believe in the promise of God. And that is to believe in God and allow God's promises to help us to endure. You can think about this. You don't have to take my word as the last word on this question, but you can think about it. Remember what Jesus said to Martha? He said, those words are not coming to my mind. That is in chapter 11, we have those statements, I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me, even though he dies, he will live. And anyone who lives and believes in me will not die. That's a fantastic statement, which only Christ could have said. Christ did not say, anyone who believes in me. You know, the first part of that statement of Jesus is addressed to those who are dying or those who are already dead. Anyone who believes in me, even if he dies, he will live. The resurrection of Jesus Christ. You know, my dear friends, the death is the last house of Pharaoh, last house of slavery, the ultimate end to all our hopes, hopes for freedom, hopes for fullness of life, hopes of eternal life. All these things come to an end in death. And standing there at the portal of death, Christ says this to us. Anyone who believes in me, even if he dies, he will live. He can hold the hand of the resurrected Christ and die in peace, because he would know, even if he dies, Christ did not say that he will not die. All right. Just as Christ himself died, he will die. But God had found a way through death to liberty, to liberation, to another reality. And that's why Christ says, even if he dies, he will live. Yeah. And he who believes, he who lives and believes will not die. That is not an assurance that death will not come. It's an assurance because of the resurrection of Christ. Death has been now transformed. Death is no more an end. Death is simply a doorway into another existence. John tells us in his first letter, chapter 3, verse 2, we do not know who we shall be, but we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he really is. Death is simply a doorway now. The nature of death has been changed by the resurrection of Jesus Christ. This God who says he lives among us, he moves among us, he is with us, he is our God and we are his people. He has changed even the nature of death, so that when we have to see other people put to torture and to death, we say, this is nothing. This is nothing. This is not an end. This is just a doorway into another way of being. I end, my dear friends, with a quote from the book of Revelation, chapter 21, 3-5. Behold, God's dwelling is with the human race. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will always be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there shall be no more death or mourning, wailing or pain, for the old order has passed away. The one who sat on the throne said, "Behold, I make all things new." The promises of God can indeed release within us such spiritual energies that even death becomes a creation of that which is new. Thank you very much.
If anybody wishes to ask
If
any...
someone wants to ask a question or something, this is supposed to be a class, so you are welcome to ask a question. You can fire, shoot. As he said, you might be frightened to ask a question, but I won't bite. Only in the examinations I bite.
First of all, thank you, Father, for your good thought on this plan for all the human beings. Yeah, well, in our practical life, we see a lot of problems human beings have to face. And when people ask us, who are called religious or who are close to God, people say, and they ask us what is the solution for all these problems and all. So we can convince a believer, one who believes in God, to some extent, saying some solution to the problems that are existing. But the problem comes to defend our faith when we have to encounter an atheist. If an atheist asks, all these things are happening in the world, where is your God? So there where we stumble to defend him or counter-argue him. So can you please help us in this line?
I understand that question, and that's I suppose a difficult question to answer as well. But you see, we have two options. One is in a tight and difficult situation to despair. All right, despair of history, despair of this tragedy that takes place in our lives. Or we have an option to live through this with hope in our hearts, with a spiritual energy, with a strength of character to get through this problem. Because both the atheists in a situation like this, for example, if coronavirus doesn't distinguish between an atheist and a believer, both might be hospitalized side by side. But a believer can smile through his experience, his struggle. He may suffer equal pain. Both will struggle for breath. But the believer can, in the struggle, smile to himself and say, God, you are close by. Yeah. But the other, who has he? That's a problem. So believing is a personal thing. You want to believe? If somebody were to ask me, you're speaking so much, is God somewhere close by? Please show us. How do I show? There isn't a way to show God to anybody. So on this, there are no arguments, convincing, arguments to prove to other people. People see it as if they don't see it. And those who see, they enjoy the benefit of a hopeful living. The presence of a God, brothers, in your life can enormously help you with assurance. An absence of a God or anything else in our life can send us into a despair, anguish, loneliness, abandonment. Now, it's your choice. I would leave it to the person who asked me that question, the choice. Choice is yours. All right? That's what I would say.
Thank you, Father.
Okay. Yeah.
When we endure or when we experience tragic things in life, we don't see the God at that moment. Maybe at a later time when we look back, like Joseph in the Old Testament, when we look back, we see the hand of God, the footprints of God. Second thing is, when we have too much overtaken by the presence of God and say, it is God permitted evil, will it not reduce the capacity to resist the evils that are happening? There has to be a human resistance to convert the evil situation to a positive thing. No?
True. Yeah. Otherwise, religion will become an opiate, as Karl Marx would say. All right. Yeah, if we are going to suffer everything that happens to us as God willing, I would say, we should do whatever we can to avoid trouble. Now, I can't keep my plate upside down and then ask God, please fill my plate. I must at least open my plate. I can't walk at night without light anywhere, run anywhere and, break my nuts and say, God will protect me. I have to do what I can in life, all right? I think every hope that is fulfilled in a believer's life makes him stronger, both to commit himself to realizing the next hope, right? God has helped me with this. Now, I must step forward as much as I can to change the situation, to meet the situation. But when everything is done, and still something happens in our lives, that's when this process of trusting in God should take place. Maybe I didn't emphasize that a lot. The Lord did tell us that we must keep awake, our oil lamps burning, that we must expend energy on increasing our talents. The Lord did instruct us. Otherwise, we are going to bury our energies, etc., or whatever we can do in this life. I think the Lord will call us to account. You fool, what did you do? All right. So we have to do what we can, and after having done, after all our planning, organization, there comes a limit to what we can do. And then what happens is in God's hand. I think trust should bring us to this type of choices in our life. Yeah. After having done everything we can do. Yeah. Kanmuri.
Father, one person goes to parish priest and says, Father, I am doing everything that God demands of me, but still I am suffering. And there is another person who is not doing anything that God commanded, but is prospering. So now he asks me, does God fulfill his promises at all that he has promised in the Bible? I don't see anything. And should I say him, my dear son, persist in your faith, God will favor you? Or about the wicked, maybe God will take note of him in next life? How to respond to these situations?
See, the question would not arise if the believer really takes delight in his connection with his God. He is not hoping that his bank balance would increase and that his illness will get healed, that he will be as prosperous as his neighbor, etc. If he is hoping for these things, then I think his belief is, not truly making him to rest in God's hand. He is trying to rest on something material. Both are looking for the same thing. All right. The Lord told us, He brought that out very beautifully. When you go to a party, take the last seat, not with the hope that the host would come and take you to the first seat. Because then both, the man who took the first seat, now who's asked to leave the first seat, and this man who was never invited, both will leave the marriage hall with the same sense of despair. You understand? The fact that you take the last seat is an act of freedom because God is with you. You don't need a better seat, a higher seat, because He is with you. See, when our faith is experienced at that level of delight in God, then it doesn't matter anymore. Once in a while we ask, why do wicked men prosper? The psalmist asked that in Psalm 73. All right. Sometimes we ask that question, but in the end, I think, the benefit of being free at a deepest level of our life, that there is nothing that anyone can give or take away, and that brings such wonderful freedom in your personal life, you would not want to exchange this for anything. That's the power of faith and trust in God. Yeah.
Thank you, dear brothers, for your valuable questions, and Father, for your convincing answers. I think we will wind up the session with a vote of thanks.
This August gathering this morning to express our cordial words of gratitude to all who are present over here. First of all, it's my immense pleasure and gracious privilege to express our heartfelt gratitude to our eminent speaker of the day, Reverend Father Henry Angel. Father, you enshrouded us with your words of eloquence and wisdom. Indubitably, your lecture on promises of God that bracket and motivate Christian endurance was really an informative session. And may I request all of you, the audience present over here, to present him a bouquet of flowers by a huge round of applause. Thank you, Father. May I also take this occasion to thank all our renowned personalities who are present amidst us, namely Father John Peter, the Rector, Father Rajesh, the Dean of Studies, Father Claudy Vos, Father Matthew Thornikel, and Father Ignatius Eka. Thank you, dear Fathers, for the kind gesture of gracing this gathering with your commendable presence. Thank you, Fathers. I also sincerely acknowledge the benevolent efforts put in by our technicians, namely Brother Amit, Brother Sunit, Brother Hensley, and Brother Ankit, for arranging the live telecast of today's lecture, and for all the other technical arrangements. Thank you, dear brothers. Finally, yet importantly, I would like to convey a word of gratitude to all of you, the audience and all our viewers on the live telecast. Thank you all for the active and attentive participation all throughout this lecture session. Thank you. Thank you all. Have a nice day.
Now the session is ended, and we would like to listen to Father Rector.
Turn it off, it's not a live streaming.